the government has led a propaganda effort to confuse people as to what inflation is, but it's an expansion of the money supply. It is a tax. It is a tax on savers, on people that own dollars. So there's two ways the government can pay for its spending. It can collect taxes legitimately by taking your money, or it can do it illegitimately by taking your purchasing power. So let's say the government takes your money. They take money from you and they give it to somebody else. Now somebody else can spend it and you can't, right? You see that loss of purchasing power because money is actually taken away from you. But the other way they do it, surreptitiously, is they don't take anything away from you. They just print money up out of thin air and they give that money to somebody else. And now that somebody else spends something. But the amount of goods and services to buy hasn't expanded. The government doesn't print purchasing power. It just prints claims to the existing production supply of goods and services. So what happens is the people who get the new money go out and spend it, and that bids up prices. And so what happens is prices go up, and so now you have less, you can buy less stuff. Not because you have less money, but because your money is less valuable and prices go up. So we are about to experience in America inflation on an unprecedented scale in this country. We're going to see the cost of living skyrocket, and it's going to happen very, very quickly. It's going to hit people like a ton of bricks, and they're not going to see this coming, right? More people are going to be blindsided by the dollar crisis than by the financial crisis. And the dollar crisis is much worse than a financial crisis, because when we had the financial crisis, the Fed was able to print dollars to bail everybody out. Well, when you have a dollar crisis, that doesn't matter anymore. You can't print dollars because nobody wants them. And that means it's not just a dollar crisis, it is a sovereign debt crisis. It's not just subprime mortgages that are going to go bad. It is U.S. Treasuries that are going to go bad. And of course, if U.S. Treasuries are bad, so are all debts denominated in U.S. dollars. Corporate bonds, muni bonds, if you've got a pension, if you've got an annuity, you're going to get wiped out. The money that you receive is going to buy very little and potentially nothing at all. Because the only way the Federal Reserve is going to prevent the dollar from becoming monopoly money is going to be to finally do the right thing, something that it has resisted doing the entire time. The last person who did the right thing is no longer alive, Paul Volcker in 1980. The dollar was collapsing in the 1970s. Why? Because we printed a lot of money in the 1960s, and then we went off the gold standard in 1971, and the dollar tanked. It lost about 2/3 of its value against other fiat currencies like the Deutschmark, the Swiss franc, the Japanese yen, and gold went up 20-fold from $35 an ounce to over 800. Oil went up 10-fold. The dollar was going to get killed back then, but Volcker allowed interest rates to rise to 20%, and that put a floor beneath the dollar. That's what it took to rebuild confidence in a dollar that was no longer backed by gold, that was no longer as good as gold. But in order to stop the dollar from collapsing, the Federal Reserve has to let market interest rates rise. Who knows how high they would go? I think the rate would actually have to go above 20%. But here's the problem. We can't even afford a fraction of that. So if the Federal Reserve does the right thing to prevent the dollar from collapsing, the U.S. government will have to default on its treasury bonds. The majority of debtors will end up defaulting, not just the U.S. government. And the government won't just default on its treasury bonds. It will default on its pension obligations. It will default on Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits, on guaranteed loans, on the guaranteed pensions and bank accounts. All these empty promises are going to be exposed if the Fed does the right thing. But again, what's the odds that they do the right thing, given how painful doing the right thing is going to be? So instead of doing the right thing, they will double down on doing the wrong thing or triple down on it, and they are not going to let interest rates go up. So the dollar is going to fall through the floor, and inflation is going to ravage the United States, because what happened in 1971 is America went off the gold standard, but the world did not go off the dollar standard. What's about to happen is the world is going to go off the dollar standard and go back to the gold standard. That is where we're headed, because the system that we have now does not work. You cannot back your currency with an unbacked currency. Prior to the dollar being the reserve currency, gold was the reserve. Gold was money that backed up all currencies. America convinced the world to back their currencies with dollars because the dollar was as good as gold and was redeemable on demand in gold. And once we conned the world into holding onto our dollars and buying treasuries, we screwed them by defaulting. But they held our treasuries because they still got, 5, 6, 7% interest. And they still regarded the dollar as safe, even though it was no longer backed by anything. Well, now they don't get any interest on owning their treasuries, and they can see that we are going to print money into oblivion. This crisis is just getting started. The money printing is just getting started. As I said, the Federal Reserve now, or the government, is printing 60%, 60 cents out of every dollar spent. Soon that's going to be 80 cents out of every dollar. And the dollar is going to get destroyed, and it will no longer be the reserve currency. The world is going to remonetize gold. That's why gold is already over $2,000 an ounce. It's going much, much higher than $2,000 an ounce. And it's not just me saying that. Warren Buffett is finally voting with his feet. He is selling banks and he is buying gold stocks. The dollar is going to keep falling until it eventually collapses and we end up with this crisis. But what you have to understand is the entire American economy is built on the foundation of the dollar being the reserve currency. That is the secret sauce that makes this whole economy work. Once that is no longer the case, once the dollar is just another currency, then it's all over, right? It's the end of the game for America, because now we can't consume unless we produce. Now we can't borrow unless we save. We've been getting a free ride on the global gravy train. Well, that train is coming to an end, and America is going to have to deal with its greatly diminished standard of living at a time where capitalism has such a black eye, and I've never seen socialism more popular with the electorate than it is right now. What's about to happen, this economic disaster of unprecedented scale with civil unrest that's going to far exceed what we saw with the riots that we had with the Black Lives Matter. This will be much worse. We're going to have shortages of food that are going to be much greater than what we temporarily had when people were rushing to stock up COVID. Shortage of energy. It is going to be a very, very difficult time. And Americans, I think, are going to blame capitalism, and they are going to, entrust unprecedented amounts of power in the U.S. government. So we're not only going to lose a lot of our money, but we're going to lose most of our liberties.